My subscriber broke his PC, error codes, booting issues, and a broken PCIe slot. He may have even fried his 3090 Ti by attempting to water cool for the first time. He's contacted me to see if we could figure out what exactly went so wrong. Let's give it a deep clean and see if we can fix up this disaster. I lost video files and photos on a recent project, and I even had some corrupt on me. And I'd been using Wondershare Recover It for years now, which is why I'm proud to announce that they are sponsoring today's video. Wondershare Recover It can completely recover your lost photos, videos, files, audio, email from hard drives, crashed computers, NAS and Linux systems, and it'll also repair corrupted video files, photos, and other files for you. You can even try it for free. Just visit the links in the video description and download it here. Start a scan on the specific drive or device and preview your data in real time before you even pay. If your file is not found, there's no risk for you. It supports data recovery from over 2,000 storage devices and over 1,000 file formats. I've lost video and photo on this SD card. We're going to attempt to recover it. I'll use the enhanced recovery feature, which supports loads of file formats. You can see it's found hundreds of files so far. Once the scan is finished, we can select the files we want, preview them first, and click recover. I got my photos back and I got my full 4K video back. Do not forget to try out their corrupted video repair feature as well if you are having issues with yours. Go ahead and try out Wondershare Recover It. I'll leave a link in the video description. Guys, I can't leave this PC in this state. Originally the PC came in for me to fix it up, but looking closer at it for the first time, it really needs a good cleanup as well, and I'd feel so bad giving it back to him in this state. I've found mold growing inside the pump, which is not good, and that means there's probably mold in all of the other components, so it really needs a good deep clean. We've got dust everywhere. It's not the dustiest build we've ever had, but I can quite easily clean that up. If I pull everything apart, give it a good hose out, good wipe down, this will be looking as good as new. There's a lot of dust caked up between the fans and the radiators. Now, my subscriber bought a system off of his friend. It contained this 3090 Ti graphics card. He already had this system with a 1080 Ti inside and wanted to replace the 1080 Ti with this graphics card, the 3090 Ti. But he had to apply a water block, and that's where things went wrong. So let's see if we can test out the graphics card first and mimic the same issues. Okay, so to test the system, I've just put in my Intel Arc A7700 card in. I just want to see if we could get a post or a display at least on the monitor, just to confirm that it's nothing else in the system that is causing any of the issues. Better make sure the pump is unplugged. We don't want it running dry. That'll ruin it. So we've gone straight to the BIOS. I don't know if that means there's something wrong with their NVMe drives. I need to look a little bit into this because it should have went to Windows. I'll take a look, but I think I need to set up a test bench and test the GPU itself. First things first, I just plugged in the GPU that we know works into the test bench, just in case there's something else wrong with some of the parts. I just want to make sure that I get a post first before testing the other GPU, just to make sure that everything else is working so I can narrow it down to the GPU being an issue. Hopefully we get some display. So there we have it, guys. We've got display, which means we are now ready to test the other GPU. 99. Oh, wow. Okay, this is weird. I got the GPU to work now, but it didn't work the first couple of times. I haven't touched anything with the water block, but I wonder if there's something slightly shorting out in the water block that is causing it to work sometimes and not work other times. I'm gonna take the water block apart and have a look to see what the issue is. We already know the system over here boots up fine, so it's a very strange situation because my subscriber couldn't get it to work at all. So yeah, there's something weird going on with it. Let's take it apart. Yeah, there's definitely something funky going on with this GPU. I've tried HDMI, got an output. I tried display now. I'm getting an output, but just before this boot, I was getting error code D6, which is something wrong with display or cables not being plugged in properly. I know they're plugged in properly, so we're gonna have to check this water block out. So after pulling apart the water block, I think I have found the issue. So GPU looks pretty good. And he almost had the application right. Now, what I believe the issue is, because GPU blocks are made with very tight tolerances because there are so many little components located on the PCB of the graphics card. I think because he has forgotten to cut the thermal pad down to size on both sides, there's a little bit of overhang there. It has sat on individual components, which push the graphics card up a little bit and cause it to bend a little bit when you tighten it down with screws. Because tolerances are so tight, this has been creating a little short because of the bend. Something is making contact with something that it shouldn't. Let me bring you guys in closer to have a look. So both these two standoffs on the side here, you can see because he has left the thermal pad too long, it's actually meant to be cut pretty much in half. You can see that they've actually been squished between the PCB and the standoff itself. This causes flex in the PCB and it's making something touch the PCB that shouldn't be touching it, causing a short. At least that's my theory. So we're gonna cut the thermal pads to the proper size, we'll put it back on the test bench and we'll see if we can mimic any of the error codes that we were getting originally, and if not, then we've fixed the GPU issue. It's such a shame. I think that the damage has already been done and it's irreversible. We go to plug in the GPU, we power it up, half the time it's working perfectly fine. The other half, we're getting code D6 on the motherboard. That usually relates to loose cables here or there. We've made sure all cables are plugged in correctly. We've tried different cables, we've tried different ports, both display and HDMI, and we've completely changed the power supply numerous amounts of times as well. And we've also changed even the 24 pin and the CPU power, but we cannot get this issue to fix. So I think some permanent damage has been done and a half working GPU is just not good enough. So I think we're gonna replace it with an RTX 4080. Also getting D6 with no block. But in the meantime, it's time to take apart the system and let's give everything a deep clean. Guys, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt for a second. So while pulling this apart, I noticed that these screws for mounting this down were upside down. The CPU block was not making good contact with the CPU at all. It was completely loose. There's no mounting pressure that was being applied on there. So it makes me wonder if the CPU was ever overheating or not. Not only that, but no wonder they put it upside down. It's because they're not even using the backplate for an EK water block. This is from like an AIO cooler or something like that. I don't know what is going on. I don't even know if I have a spare backplate for them. Not only that, but they're missing the screws that are meant to be on the top of here. I'm not sure if I have any of that spare, but like that was just kind of ghetto put together. And I don't know, I'm surprised there was not any more issues with this PC than what I've been told. I'm surprised the CPU didn't overheat. I'll have to talk to the subscriber about that and see if there was any issues there. Let's take a closer look at the case. The first thing I noticed was a white liquid of some kind on the front of the case and a tissue. I also noticed that under the radiator bracket, there was evidence of liquid spillage. I mean, it's still wet inside the case, but not only that, the liquid also made its way into the power supply shroud area. So there has been some leaks at some point in time and they still haven't dried up, so it makes me think it was more recent. I mean, it's all over the top here. Now, as I said, it's not the dustiest build that we've ever dealt with, but there is plenty of dust on top that really needs to be removed. The cables look absolutely furry, so we need to give it a good blowout and then we'll give it a good wipe down as well. The case has a couple of scuff marks here and there, but overall it's not in a bad condition. The back section here is probably the worst. We have screw holes which were drilled in there. We've also got a bit of leftover foam where the pump was sitting on, so we're gonna try and get all of that off. And there's some sort of white paint or adhesive that is stuck on here. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to remove that, but we will do our best. So let's give it a clean. The case is now looking nice and fresh. We did clean it up really well, got rid of all that dust in all of the hard to reach areas as well. There is so many scuff marks over this case though. We've got scratches, we've got metal bits shown where they've tried to drill through areas and haven't quite succeeded. On the front, we tried our hardest to remove the liquid stains, but they are like permanently baked onto the front panel. They're impossible to remove. We tried everything to get them off. For the most part though, if you're looking closely at this particular case, just the scuff marks, that's what makes it look a little underwhelming at times, but there's not much we can do about that. We even managed to put a bit of isopropyl alcohol on this plate here, and we removed the leftover foam, the leftover stickers and stuff that were on there just to clean it up a lot more. And I think we've done a really good job of it. There's no residue left on there. So we're extremely happy with how it turned out. So the motherboard itself is actually not in too bad a shape. All I really want to clean up is a lot of that grease that's all over it. There's fingerprints and stuff as well. CPU looks really clean, looks good. I actually had a look at the pins underneath. Nothing looks odd there. The motherboard itself does have a bit of dust in amongst all of these connectors here and just throughout. It just needs a little bit of a toothbrush to loosen that up, and then we'll sort of blow it off and wipe it down. There are a few bent pins down the bottom left-hand side, so I'm going to straighten them up too. And the back I/O, it just needs a little bit of a dusting as well, especially inside a lot of the ports. Now we are missing a few covers, and I would say that is because he installed the NVMe drive with the heatsink left on. So I'll see if he still has that cover or not. Let's get cleaning. The motherboard looks brand new. It cleaned up absolutely fantastic. We got all of the grease off of all of the components on the motherboard. There's no more fingerprints on there. Of course, when I'm building, we'll probably get more, but we'll remove them. No more hair stuck to it, no more dust. We got in with the toothbrush. The only thing that I would say makes this motherboard not look brand new is the rear side, where we can see just some general wear and tear scuff marks. Apart from that, I'm very happy with the end result. There's not really much I need to say about the NVMe drives. They're actually pretty clean. I might give them a bit of a wipe down. However, I will say that they were installed incorrectly. This particular motherboard that we are using has a latching design, and these were actually screwed in without the latches installed. You don't actually need the screw to keep these down. You latch them in place, and then you put the heatsink over the top. Obviously, he hasn't used the heatsink that came with the motherboard because this one has a built-in heatsink, and I guess that's completely up to him. Personally, I'd remove this heatsink, put this in, and then use the motherboard heatsink, so all three are getting the benefits of it. Honestly guys, I think the power supply is probably the cleanest part of this system. There's no dust on it really. There's a little bit on the inside, so we will get the blower in there. But apart from that, I don't think there's any need to take it apart. I'll just give it a quick wipe over and it'll be good to go. You know, since starting the cleaning series, if there's one piece of hardware that really grosses me out, it has to be computer fans. The amount of dust that it collects and the way that it just sticks to the fan is absolutely disgusting. It kind of looks like wool mixed with spider webs and doesn't give the best smell, and yeah, it just looks gross. So we're gonna start by trying to blow a lot of this dust out, and then we'll go in with the toothbrush to see if we can loosen it up and get it in there in those tight spots to see if we can get a good clean. Ugh, I really don't want to touch these. Before and after really amazes me with these fans. These cleaned up so well. They look brand new. There's no more dust caked on them, and the fan blades are actually white. Who would have known? I don't know if any of the LEDs work, so that's some testing we're gonna have to do, but I'm super happy with how these cleaned up. And as I said, these have to be the worst part of a PC build clean, in my opinion, just with how much dust that do cake on them, but extremely happy with the finished result. Now, pretty much in line with the fans in terms of grossness has to be radiators. This is absolutely caked. There is hairs sticking out. I'm not sure if they own a pet or anything like that, but it looks like lots of dog hairs. I said this in the last video, but I'll say it again in this video. Looks like there's enough cotton on here to make your own woolen jumper. So I think we're gonna have to start with the air blower to try and release a lot of this. And I'm a bit worried about mold buildup on the inside. So what I might do first is leave some chemicals in here overnight to make sure that all mold is dead. Now the reservoir itself is quite a funky design and it looks to be in fairly good condition. The only thing I can see is a bit of condensation in there and starting of the formation of a bit of mold. So once we get that open, it should be fairly easy to remove. And I'm glad it does have these side ports as well, because we will be able to add a drain port in the system, which it never used to have. So I want to try and make it a little more easier for him to maintain himself. The reservoir looked fairly clean from afar, but when we opened it up, we found mold at the end of the hexagon tubes, so we made sure we removed all of that. We also went over it with some vinegar, because vinegar does kill mold as well, and we made sure we removed every trace of it. Got it back together, and I must say, it's actually looking really good. I don't see any wear and tear marks, no scuff marks or anything like that. Looks brand new. The only thing with this type of material is it gets fingerprints on it very easy, so we're gonna have to keep wiping it down until we get it in the build. Now the pump has to be the worst of all of the water cooling gear. As I said before, there is mold throughout. It has really formed up in there, so we need to take this right apart, make sure we give it a good deep clean. I am worried that this is spread to other components, so I'm treating them as if they have mold in them as well. The radiators will flush them out with some chemicals to make sure we kill the mold. This should be a simple fix though, because it can come right apart. And then we've got to figure out a situation with the mounting, because they simply use metal screws to actually screw directly into the case. The pump was the worst part of them all. This had the most mold growing inside. Not only that, but it's very hard to reach inside the pump. I did let it sit in some vinegar and stuff to kill mold for a little bit of time, and I also scrubbed it really well, got the toothbrush in there in those hard to reach areas, and we got all of that mold removed. I can see some slight surface cracks from where fittings may have been over tightened, so we're gonna have to make sure they keep an eye on that over time. But all in all, it's cleaned up really nicely. General wear and tear marks are present, but that's to be expected with something that is a few years old. The CPU block from the outside looks to be in good condition. I don't know what is in the inside yet, so when we take that apart, we'll have a good look. But it's missing all of its mounting hardware. It was mounted incorrectly. There wasn't some good pressure on the CPU, so I don't know what we're gonna do there. I don't think we have any spare parts to be able to mount this properly, so I don't know if he is going to get a new CPU block or not, but in the meantime, we will get this fully cleaned up. CPU block actually pulled up really well. The inside looked brand new, really. We went in there with the toothbrush in between all of the microfin channels, made sure that we got any of that gunk out of there, but for the most part, it looked pretty brand new. The only thing is we've got scuff marks on the back, which is just from general wear and tear, but we also got some mounting parts for the back so we can actually mount the CPU block as it is intended. That will also mean that the CPU is actually going to be cooled properly this time. Well, his new GPU works. Always good to test before we water block. Okay, so I've just realized why they used the AIO bracket instead of the original bracket that came with the CPU. It's because this CPU is not compatible with the socket on this motherboard. The holes on this bracket do not line up. So we're gonna have to throw a new block on there for him because we don't have the spare parts available. Let's get into it. Scratch that. It turns out the case cutout is not wide enough to avoid these nuts here on the back. Looks like we're changing water blocks. Now guys, with the water cooling loop, I've tried to follow his original design. The only thing that changes the tube that's coming from the pump into the GPU block there. But I wanted to make it user-friendly for him. If you guys remember, he had the reservoir all the way at the top of the case. You didn't have access to the fill port up the top. Not only that, but he had an LED inside of the fill port. So I removed that, made it more user-friendly for him. It's actually a functional fill port now. He didn't even have a drain valve, so I've also added that in for him so he can maintain this build with ease. If you guys remember, the pump was actually hanging in mid-air. So I've completely removed that 90-degree bracket that he was using, and I screwed the pump into the case so it is not gonna move. So let's get filling.